We're both members of the St Martin's Guild through tower bell ringing. We happen to enjoy tune handbell ringing, and that's why we're members of HRGB as well. Anything we say this evening, any views, are our personal views and are not official views of HRGB. Tonight's presentation should inform you about the background and development of HRGB, a little bit about tune ringing, and a fair bit of what we find exciting about tune ringing. So I'll hand over to Stephen to screen share and start the presentation.
Right, so try and get the screen share to work, and apologies if we have a hitch on the way through. Right, okay, so, oh, we're not at the beginning. That's clever. You just had a preview of it all. All right. So yes, the subject is introducing handbell ringers of Great Britain, and when we're looking at where we are and where we're headed, it's always useful to just reflect on how we got to where we are, and you may spot some parallels in this presentation with David Hull's presentation a couple of weeks ago on change ringing and music, because they are very, very allied. For example, he referred to Psalm 150 with the well-tuned cymbals. Whilst that may not have been referring to full circle change ringing, it certainly indicated some form of tuned bells. So we are going to start with just a brief history of where we came from. Now, it certainly surprised me that how tune ringing did go back into hundreds of years, and it wasn't until the tuning of the bells became more straightforward and accurate that they managed to move from what we had as the diatonic, which David talked about, diatonic tuning, which is just the major scale, to chromatic, which included all of he gave the piano as an example. Diatonic was all the white notes from C to C, and chromatic includes all the back notes, which gives you so much more flexibility when you are ringing. So this really opened the gates for playing tunes. And it was becoming popular in the 1700s, but the real heyday was the mid 1800s up to the early 20th century, and that really, when we say mid 1800s, in 1855, handbell ringing had become so advanced that national competitions were held at Belle Vue Gardens in Manchester. They were very well supported. They even put on special excursion trains to get the bands and their supporters into the city. And the teams played with large numbers of bells, often upwards of 150 bells per team. It was notable that the ringers were predominantly male, and predominantly from the north of England. It's said that the handbell tune ringing actually predated or was more important than the brass band side of things. I haven't researched brass band history, so I don't know how accurate that statement was. But the sort of characters that one had were these rather severe-looking, formidable characters. And whilst they're all male, I read somewhere that, in fact, there was a lady who was presented in around 1900 with a set of handbells, and she took it upon herself to go across to North America and really set about the business of getting tune ringing going over across the pond. But though all this Manchester competitions and everything surrounding that actually folded when we got into the mid-1920s, and it all went into quite a decline, which was partly caused, I guess, by the impact of World War I. But the major meetings ceased, but there were groups around the country that still met and rang, and that was the way it survived until the 1950s. And it was really at that 1960s, and it was around that time that the HRGB concept was talked about. And in that, there was a guy called Tom Bolton in Silverdale, which is somewhere just north of Lancaster, I believe. And he somehow got word that Bill Hartley in Norbury, which is just to the east of the Manchester city, wanted to actually extend their ringing with others, and so they arranged a get-together. Now that get-together, the prelude to it had an advert in the Ringing World in October 1966, and the upshot of that was that 13 teams met at Stockport for a day of ringing, and there were reputed to be 150 ringers there, including at that stage the Kingsbury handbell ringers, which of course we more recently know was Gordon Lane's group of handbell ringers, and very accomplished they were over the years. So that was a really successful day, and they agreed to have a further event in the following year. So they arranged this national rally at Ashton-under-Lyne Grammar School, and that really was where the HRGB, as we know the organisation today, was first started. And Bill Hartley, with all the work that he'd done, became the first national chairman of HRGB.
So HRGB was born, and the official aim is to advance, provide and encourage for the public benefit the art of handbell tune ringing in all its forms. So it's a nice, straightforward and positive aim. You can't really say a lot more about it because it says everything. The country was divided into regions to establish nationwide coverage and a structure that will encourage teams to join in and to invite all teams to become members. We are aware that there are teams around the country at the moment that aren't members of HRGB, and they're quite happy to function on their own without any contact with other teams. So the teams in HRGB, when you see the numbers that we'll show you in a little while, aren't prescriptive for the whole country because we know there are more.
So the regions that they decided upon were split like this. Now, the one striking feature is just how vast each of the regions is. So if you take the southwest region, the dark red, imagine those in Penzance being expected to meet up with those in Gloucester. And indeed the West Midland one, we call it the West Midland region, even though it covers not only the West Midlands conurbation, but also virtually the whole of Wales. Some pockets of Wales have allied themselves with the southwest or the northwest. But that's the size of the regions. And whilst it was structured that way, it isn't all rock solid that a team, for instance, one that's near the border, could quite rightly elect to be part of the neighbouring region, and indeed could support all the events and anything else and be involved across all the regions. So whilst it looks rigid, it in fact became very flexible. There's a couple of anomalies. One was the one that I mentioned about the West Midland region, which covers Wales, which doesn't go down too well across the border, but they really accept it, I suppose. And the other one is the Northwest includes Northern Ireland. So the HRGB, in fact, is HRUK, but I think we're not going to be voting for changing the name of it.
Let's not be picky.
But that's the way it's divided up.
So the basic structure of HRGB, you can see is shown by this sort of pie chart. At the heart of the HRGB structure is the National Executive Committee, which comprises elected officers and 2 representatives from each region. They meet 3 times a year, and details from these meetings are sent to regional committees for any feedback or action needed. The regional committees are elected at regional AGMs, and they also meet 3 times a year. HRGB is a registered charity, and members pay their subs into central administration, and then a proportion is distributed into the regions, for the regions to use as they see fit. The regions operate independently, but within the national rules of HRGB. Each region could have its own rules, so long as they stay within the aims of HRGB.
So with the autonomy of it, we've got various things that's come out, some nationally and some of them are local. So the national magazine Reverberations is quite a decent document, which you might be able to see in the thumbnail, but we'll show you later on when we come on. And that comes out twice yearly. The regional newsletters are often quarterly, and some of them are by electronic means, and some are printed and sent around as in booklet form, not quite as extensive as the national one, but still quite impressive documents. And their autonomy means that you can get regional initiatives. For instance, just a couple there, the Southwest region, they have this scheme of ringing around the region. In the West Midlands, we are in the embryonic phase, really, of Handbells on Tour. And really what that is those of us who are sort of more central in terms of the structure to it, going out to help local bands, groups of people that want to ring perhaps more complex things, or just help with where they are. It isn't imposing anything on them. It is a supportive scheme that we're trying to put in place. And all of the regions, I think, have at least a 5-octave. Some have 6, 7-octave bell orchestras, which sort of get in members from the region who really want to develop their skills and don't really get the opportunity locally to ring on 5 or 6, 7 octaves. So it gives a great chance for advancement, and they can take their skills back, of course, back into their local groups. So Rowena said that not all handbell tuneringers are HRGB members. The 2018 numbers, which were published with the annual report of 2018, it showed that there were just 33 youth teams registered with 505 members. The youth do not, as a general thing, pay any annual subscription. They come in funded effectively from the centre. Adults are a slightly different matter, that we pay £12 a year into the central funds. And you don't have to be in a team to be a member of HRGB. So that is the number of people who recognise themselves as being members of HRGB. The numbers have groups and people, bands that are around that aren't, go their own way. We just don't know. We also don't know the origins of the people, the analysis in terms of, I suspect a lot of the adults are retired teachers, but we don't know that in any certainty. But there's a reasonable number spread around the country. So why do we play tunes? We hope to demonstrate later on that it can get quite exciting. I always think that the tuning has the same sort of difficulty as perhaps a peal of stem and triples. You never know that you're going to get to the end until you've got there, because it can fall apart ever so easily. But you can play at any level. And when it started off, a lot of the bands started in churches. So hymns and the popular folk melodies were their staple repertoire. And now we can arrange modern pieces. One of the problems with getting into the modern pieces, of course, you need to keep on the right side of all the copyright regulations, because the composers quite rightly lay claim to the pieces of music. But if you can get around those, you can simplify some quite complex pieces, which make popular themes more accessible, exciting, and encourage the less experienced to get into it even more. So it is quite an important element to get some modern pieces to get them really there. So tunes are relatively uncomplicated to ring. It's really a matter that you need to be able to count, same as change ringing, and it helps if you've got a bit of rhythm. But it's fun just to actually be able to ring something without having to spend months trying to master the techniques of the instrument. So you can quickly become part of an ensemble, and it's one of the greatest features that makes it so inclusive and accessible to a vast range of ages. And the thing is that when you're ringing the tunes, if you think about what happens if you're ringing, say, change ringing on handbells, change ringing, a bell doesn't ring in the right place, or it's disappeared, then you notice it. When you're bringing a tune with the chords that are involved in it, because it isn't just one bell at a time, you can have quite complex chords. If you miss your point, your time when you should be ringing the bell, it doesn't really show up quite as much. Obviously, if you're playing the tune, it might be missed. Some people might notice it, but it's that. But then, as your abilities develop, you can get into all these different techniques, which you'll be seeing something of a bit later on, to add colour and character. And equally, you don't need to be able to read music. We saw with David's the staff notation of music, but in handbells we can adapt it to when you're playing tunes into different ways.
So there are several different ways of presenting the music, and each team will use the method that best suits their members. The most frequently used ones are the staff notation, otherwise known as music notes, or numbers. It's quite easy, but it's quite time consuming to convert the notes into numbers. But it can be worthwhile if you've got a group of people who can't or won't learn to read music. So an example of converting them, we've got Sandra Winter's arrangement of Unto Us a Child is Born in music staff notation, so the music notes of that. So if we wanted to convert that to numbers, we would set out the notes, and then we would assign each note a number. And then, using a grid system, there's 4 beats in a bar with this one. We use grids of 4, and for each beat, you write the number where that bell rings. I hope that makes sense. It's very easy because you follow your line and count the number, and when your number appears, you ring.
So that seems very simple, and you have to just focus and concentrate on that line and not deviate from it, and not be distracted by the bird flying past the window or whatever as you're going through. So that's really the music side. The bells that we actually ring, many of you will have seen the standard English handbell up the tower, because when they installed rings, they often gave a set of diatonically tuned, obviously, but a set of handbells for to match the tower. But these days there are 2 principal types of bell which are used around. One is the English one, which is in this case on the left-hand side, English handbell. These are cast by Whitechapel and tuned, and all the fittings of Whitechapel. The ones on the right are American, and they are Shawmerick origin. 2 main people in the States that are making handbells are Shawmerick and Mulmark. And the notable differences that we've got, by getting them on the screen, I seem to have stretched the shape of the bell a little bit. The British ones are round, I can assure you. They don't have this sort of funny lip on them. But the main difference that you can see there is that the handles are leather for the UK ones, and the North American ones have plastic handles. And whilst they have basically the same composition of metals, the old 80-20 rule of copper and tin, the shape is slightly different between the 2, and the tone you get out of them is totally different, really. That the Whitechapel bells give a very mellow sound, and the North American ones are quite brassy and brash. But if we and it isn't just the bell shape; it's also the clapper assembly that we have in the two sources. If we look at the Whitechapel one, which is on the left there, you can see that there's in the biggest bell there's a big felt clapper there, covered clapper, and in the mid-range you've got a felt covered leather clapper. Then we go into leather, and at the top end it is the polymer plastic one. Whereas in the States, their clapper is that central circular one, which has 3 settings on it. So you may not be able to see it too clearly, but there's an H, M, and S. And the H is just straightforward polymer against the bell, very solid. The M has a small hole, and the S has a bigger hole. Now that means that, depends which setting it's on, the volume that you get out of that clapper, and that really changes the way in which the clappers impact on the bell, and the sound that comes out of them. So we've seen the music, we've seen the bell structure itself. It's then really getting into the techniques.
So there's all sorts of different techniques, and I'll describe them first of all. Then we'll show you a video that shows the techniques, and when we've finished sharing screens, we've got the bells and all the bits and pieces out, and we can demonstrate them to you. The bells are sighted on foam pads on the tables while not being run, and one of the functions of the foam pads is that the bells can be put down silently, and it doesn't damage the bells. So these that I'm going to describe now will all be, you should be able to spot them in the first video. The first one is malleting, We have specific mallets for handbells with softer ends than the mallets that are used for hammering in tent cakes. Those for the larger bells have soft ends to them, and those for the smaller bells have nylon ends. The off the shoulder and off the table denote two different ways of using the bells. The former has the off the shoulder one, the former, has the bells held upwards and then you ring them forwards. Off the table has the bells on the table and you lift them up and the clapper rings upwards and then you put them down again. Both of these techniques are used at different times in the video. Off the table is used all the time by some teams, and other teams use it mainly just for larger bells when it's difficult to sort of pick them up and ring them and put them down again. So it is possible to incorporate a mixture of styles. So going on to damping, generally the notes are required to sound the length of the note and not to run on, which would clash with the subsequent note. The damping can be achieved by resting the bell against the shoulder or on the table, depending on which method you're using. Now, 4 in hand is used when there are more notes than hands available. Usually 2 bells are held in each hand, although it's possible to have 3. The bells being positioned perpendicularly to each other so that the different notes are sounded when different directions of ringing are being used. It's most commonly used for smaller bells for logistical reasons. So mart, and martellato means strongly accented, is used for an accented sound. For a bell to be marted, the bell is tapped onto the foam pad horizontally, and that gives an accented sound.
Okay, so this first video, I don't know if I need to apologise or not, but it is a Christmas based one. We recorded it, 4 of us, as you'll see in a moment, over several months last year when all the different lockdown restrictions were in. So at one stage we were able to be down with the other 2 in the same room as them. Other times we were separated. But it was used, we did it all for a charity concert, which was sent out on YouTube by the Brecon and
District Male Choir.
Brecon and District Male Choir down in Wales. So hopefully this will play through and you will hear and see just what Rowena has been talking about. So that was quite an exciting one to try and put together. obviously multi-layered, and with the advances that have been in the editing, audio editing and video editing, it was quite challenged but great fun.
It was really good fun to do that. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
So you saw a real mixture in there. This next piece, am I doing this one? Or are you doing this one? The Ecclesfield handbell ringers are one of the oldest that's still in existence. They formed back at the early part of the 1900s, so they've been going over 100 years as an organisation. The ringers are a lot younger than that. But this one, we're showing you this one because it is a very complex piece. It was played in concert at a national rally, and they are playing off the table, solely off the table. Rowena mentioned that some do it that way wholly, and these guys do. Feel distracted with what's going on as much as you like. Now, this is a YouTube one, which I hope is going to come through all right to you. So that's the start of it. It gets even more exciting as we get further in towards the end. So if I just play the last little bit for you, then hopefully it'll come through okay. Well, there we are.
It always feels very odd when you're doing online presentations. You don't get claps, but you definitely deserve, from your clip and that clip, definitely deserve lots of claps. And Susan's been in the chat box, spectacular. I think I'd echo that.
Oh, thanks so much.
That's good to know.
Now, this next one, we're not going to fill the whole evening with these parts, but hopefully we're getting across to you just how entertaining it is. And also, the important thing is how visual it is. That if you just heard that music on its own without any visuals, I guess it would get quite boring and wonder what's happening with it. But the excitement of it with it all there is something. Now, these Handbells Unlimited, they're an American couple, very accomplished. And the thing about all the music that we get for handbell ringing, a considerable amount of it is composed or arranged in North America, and that's both religious and secular music. But we do have some excellent composers and arrangers based in the UK, This next one sort of crosses across both of them because the composer is UK based. His name is Stuart Wallace, who happens to be our music minister at Knowle Parish Church. And he composed a piece called Callus Americanus for a piano duet. It was picked up by this couple in North America, and they thought that's an ideal one to do for a handbell duet with a piano accompaniment. And it really shows how versatile you can be when you have their sort of expertise with it. We are showing the top end of things at the moment. Afraid I showed you all of that because I just think it is just an amazing piece.
As an aside for that, in lockdown, at the beginning of lockdown, Stephen and I, knowing that music and knowing that it was available as a handbell duet, set out to be able to play it as a duet by the end of lockdown. And I have to say, we significantly failed. It is so difficult to start, putting all the bells all over the place. And it didn't suit my lack of organisation. So, yeah, we can't emulate them.
Whenever I do see it, I often think how often they've had the equivalent that I've had, certainly, in Lost Fields of Stedman Triples. Because it can be perfect and then just fall apart. All you need to do is flick one of those bells up in the air instead of catching it. All sorts of things go wrong. Anyway, moving on. We have some more techniques, I think, now for you.
So I'll just describe a few more of the techniques that I'll show you in a bit. Thumb damping. I mentioned damping earlier on, but you can do thumb damping when you have a thumb or finger in contact with the bell metal to produce a shorter, more staccato sound. However, as contact with the perspiration in the skin can affect the metal through oxidization and subsequently the tuning of the bell, gloves are used for ringing wherever possible. Gloves used for handbell ringing have small silicon dots on the fingers, so it's possible to turn the pages of music efficiently. If you've ever tried turning the page with ordinary gloves on, you'd know how difficult that was. Shelley ringing is used to produce notes an octave higher without the need for additional ringers. Two bells an octave apart are held in each hand with the clappers pointing in the same direction, so that when they rung, they produce two notes an octave apart at the same time. Shaking, the bell is rung quickly backwards and forwards to produce a sound similar to a trill. Vibrato uses the Doppler effect so that the bell is struck and then shaken from side to side. And there's also the singing bell. So you use a singing stick, which is a hardwood dowel, and it's rubbed around the rim of the bell to produce an ethereal sound. The principle is similar to rubbing a wetted finger around the top of a wine glass or beer bottle. We've all done that in the pub, I'm sure. Our singing sticks are covered in silicone to increase contact with the bell and prevent it from slipping off. Other techniques to make slightly different sounds, to make some variety in the sound that we're making, are bell plates. Bell plates consist of a handle attached to an aluminium plate in the shape of a trapezoid, and it's struck by an attached hammer. The shape is similar to a director's scraper.
And we don't actually have any here, but this is an image of what the bell plates look like.
They're light in weight, easy to play and to transport, and they're extremely useful for children. You'll notice the handles are black or white, and that's just like the notes on a piano. For other different sounds, we use hand chimes, and these will be seen in one of the next videos. The chimes are made from an alloy of aluminium and are a square-shaped hollow tube with an external clapper mechanism. Chimes are very useful for children as they're more difficult to damage. The chimes, not the children. We also use them for interactive sessions, which often form part of our presentations to groups that we entertain. The interactive sessions are particularly well received at care homes and the Alzheimer groups that we entertain on a regular basis. And again, they're black and white. Got two white ones there, but I'll show you a black one in a minute, that relates the black and white notes on the piano. And then one technique that we do not use is to ring a bell and then dip the rim into a bowl of water. I've never been able to reconcile the idea of dipping a musical instrument into water.
So we're now going to take a little bit of a break and stop sharing the screen so we can show you some of these techniques and things around before we move on into a video which shows the hand chimes on their own. So but hopefully we get back into that without losing the pages, but we'll see how it goes. You're on.
Right, okay. I'll have to move. So I'll start with the mallets. I've got a selection of mallets here. This one is obviously for a big bell, and then the polyester end is for the smaller bell. So when you ring a large bell, you do it externally, and you hit the bell in the same place where the clapper would strike internally. And it just makes a slightly more muted staccato sound. So that's the big one. And likewise with the little bells. Damping, when you ring a bell off the shoulder, so this is off the shoulder ringing, and then I bring it back to my shoulder, it stops the vibrations and the bell stops ringing. So I can make the note last as long or as short as I want to. And the same with the other ones. The four in hand that you saw in all these videos, two bells in each hand, two facing forward and two facing sideways. And then, so I could ring 4 bells instead of 2, making a ringer redundant. But actually, it's really helpful because when you've got lots of little bells at the top, it's good to do. So the Shelley ringing, where you've got 2 bells an octave apart, you would need 2 people to ring those. But if I cross them over and hold them like that, with the clappers headed in the same direction, I've got the sound of 2 bells from one hand. Hooray! Shaking is really what it says. So I'm ringing it back and forwards, and it's just going like the clappers, really. And vibrato. So I would ring and then shake it from side to side. So you've got a slightly different sound. It's just a way of varying the sound that we do. So to mart a bell, the martellato, I'll just have the screen down. We just hit it, have the bell horizontally, and onto that's a foam pad on the table, like that, and it just makes a nice staccato or accented sound. So the singing bell, the singing sticks, you have a singing stick. Piece of hardwood dowel, it needs to be hardwood, and this has got the heat shrunk silicon on it. Then you just go round and round, and you get that lovely. I don't know. I hope this is picking it up properly. It's just the lovely ethereal sound that you get, and it carries on and on.
Yeah, you can really hear it.
Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Ooh, have I done them all? Hand chimes. So I've got 2 large chimes here, a black and a white. So lovely, lovely mellow sound, and you have to damp them, because if I rang them together, get the 2 sounds. So you have ring it and damp it. And when you've got bony shoulders like me, you can bounce them off, which isn't very nice. And then there's the tiddly ones. These are the smallest hand chimes we've got. It just makes a different sound from the bells, which vibrates a little bit more in a more mellow way. So the chimes are what you're going to see in the next 2 videos. Yeah.
Right, so we're going back onto share, and hopefully we'll get back into the presentation somewhere near.
Can I just say one more thing? My gloves have all got, you probably can't see, I've got little silicon dots on them, so I can pick up pieces of paper if I want to.
Okay. Looks like I'm going back to the beginning.
Don't despair though.
We'll just zip through. I think we're still sharing. Oh, there we are. We're back to the chimes. Yep. Okay, so now here are a couple of same school, different age ranges, showing how you can actually take a piece of music, one piece of music. This is going to be Edelweiss, I think this one is.
It's Edelweiss, yeah.
And it's a simple arrangement for the children at school to play. A lot of the complexity is taken out of what we've seen before. So this is getting it into a sphere where we are more likely to be able to use it around the regions. Apologies for the background noise in it. So that shows how straightforward, simple and straightforward it can be. Moving into a more older age range of group, same school, again hand chimes, and a slightly more complex piece of music.
From Les Mis.
From Les Mis. Play a snippet of this. So that, I hope, demonstrates that you can actually get things quite easily into something which is quite feasible for the youngsters to get involved with, and still feels quite current. You may have noticed the type of character we had in those. They are in fact a Hong Kong school, and that brings us quite neatly around to our international scene and how that fits in with HRGB. It is a bit mixed, but HRGB is a member of the International Handbell Committee. There are only 8 countries that actually are involved in the international scene at the moment. And if we look at a world map which plots the countries or the teams in the countries around, you can see that there are a lot more teams spread around the world than actually feature on the formally international scene. Most notably, I mean, this is a German-based map, and being interactive, you can click on all those different dots, and it is amazing how many of the dots are churches, schools, or music colleges. They're not sort of town bands and that sort of thing, but they're all linked into either a church or an educational establishment. And as you can see, Germany is one big red block. I don't think that they actually get involved at all with the international scene that HRGB is part of, and the way in which the international one is promoted, I suppose it is because we've only got those 8 countries involved in organising things, and it really comes.
There's every 2 years there's an international symposium that's hosted by different countries each time. In 2020 it should have been Hong Kong. Obviously that didn't go ahead. 2022 is Nashville, Tennessee. After that, Japan. Then it comes to the UK in 2026. Obviously, it involves quite a bit of organisation to get your whole team to go out to another country. But they are massive gatherings. They have enormous halls with hundreds of people in. It's I've never been to one, but the recordings I've heard have been quite spine-tingling. Absolutely amazing.
Okay. We're getting into the home straight, so stick with us. Parallels with change ringing. I'm sure that we could all come up with a whole string of ones to put it into the list, but just to give you a little bit of an indication as to where we think we're going. You saw there with those Hong Kong children that it develops the teamwork, it develops the rhythm. You can really get some exciting music out of it. The not so positive side is that when we come on to this public perception, during David Holt's presentation, I think it was Will Bosworth said, that we have this perception gap. And he also noted that that doesn't exist in North America, for instance. And if we look around at the way in which the other countries are organising it, they do have a massive sort of age range development side of things within their groups, and the mystery of handbell ringing, and indeed the change ringing, I suppose, with it, isn't as great there because they've all embraced it, and it is very much part of the community. We have the age profile. We're all getting older. There are pockets around the country where it is nowhere near as poor, just same as it is in handbell ringing, where the youth development is well ahead of other areas. And it's not all depressing news, because there are various things within the handbell tune ringing side of things which are developing, have been in existence, and do actually help to promote handbell ringing.
The Crescendo scheme, which is the HRGB scheme, is for young new ringers with staged awards, and it recognises their progress with certificates and badges. There's a William Hartley Memorial Fund, which has various sets of bells which it will loan out to new teams or teams who need to borrow bells for some reason. At the moment, there's one currently on loan to Northumbria University, where they're developing within their music degree teaching handbells, so that when these people go out into schools to teach, they've got a better appreciation of tune ringing and are more likely to teach it then. The Memorial Fund will also make interest-free loans for people who want to extend their sets. There's also working with the Scouts and Guides. We've done various initiatives with our local guides and scouts on tune ringing and tower bell ringing, which have been successful.
And the Handbells into Schools project is one which is being developed as a potentially national project. It was trialled with a Berkshire school, and it's being further developed down in the southeast, and they are hoping to extend it into Devon. Obviously, a lot of things have been on hold for well over 12 months now. So how that's going to affect things, it may actually make everyone hungrier to get involved with things. In the West Midlands ourselves, again, we've suffered such the same as everywhere else. We were developing a link with Birmingham Conservatoire, happened to be their percussion section, but we had a couple of years before, we had an absolutely cracking session with them. They loved, especially the big bells, you just couldn't get them off them. They really enjoyed making music with the bells. And around the region, we've got some links with primary schools where lunchtime and after school clubs, and the whole of the education side, I'm sure, is going to be up for debate as to how it can best be advanced there with it. And as part of that, of course, there's this joint initiative with the Central Council, which hopefully we've got Simon online, and he will perhaps be able to give us an update on that in a short while. So we've got, we're now really doing the statutory little bit. That's where we've got the information from, and that's just there for information, really.
And the other important, very, very important comparison with tune ringing and change ringing is that everybody loves the cakes at rally and quarterly meeting teas. We're still working on the banana sandwiches.
And that is it, Arthur. So
Thank
I'll
you.
stop sharing now, and thanks for all your listening.
Yeah, thank you, everybody,
Super.
staying with us.
Thank you both so much. I think you know, I said to you before, it's very odd when you're doing online talks, and you know those clips definitely warranted a huge amount of sort of celebration and applause. So you know, on sort of behalf of everyone here, we'll sort of do some virtual applause for you. I think, and I particularly enjoyed the one, obviously, of your family. You know, your daughter and son-in-law doing the Christmas Carol with you. It was just beautiful. I think Susan was giving all the clips 5 out of 5 stars. Is that right, Susan? Yeah.
Thank you, Susan.
Super. Can I invite Simon in for then to talk about that partnership between the Central Council and
yeah. Yes, I'm quite happy to. Yeah, that was really, really good. I really enjoyed that. Yes, we started working on yeah, this is with my Central Council hat on now. We started working on a Heritage Lottery Fund bid maybe 6 months ago, and it was particularly then focused on getting ringing into schools using mobile belfries, and a new mobile belfry we're planning to build. And Roger Booth, who's working on the project particularly, did research and came across this Bells in Schools project that HRGB had been running in the southeast, and got in touch with that region. And we were put in touch with Tim Willits, who's the national, is he chairman of HRGB, and he was very excited by the possibility, and it quickly became a joint bid because of the way in which HRGB had already established this way of getting into schools with bells via music hubs, which is a sort of modern equivalent of peripatetic music teachers, and they'd gone through these hubs, and we don't really mind between us how youngsters get involved in bell ringing. If it starts off with a handbell, and if they get interested, it's a very good way of getting in. And those groups were particularly using chimes and bell plates and stuff, which some people teaching change ringing have used. So I'm actually double tasking at the moment, because I've got a meeting at 9 o'clock, which is the next. I'm proofreading the bid at the moment, and I've got a meeting with. It's a joint venture as well with ART. And it's a meeting with Roger and Leslie at 9 o'clock to go through the rest of some of the detail of this. But it's interesting, I think, because it's the first, to our knowledge, it's the first time that HRGB and the Central Council have collaborated on anything. And I mean, I've sort of grown up in ringing, thinking the HRGB and tune ringers were really something else. And it's nice to find that people like Steve and Rowena, who we know as change ringers, are actually on the other side as well. And maybe it's all not so bad. So it's progressing. It's very exciting. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Simon. And Rowena and Shipley, how do you like being called not that bad? You know, on the other side, not that bad. Super. Thanks for that, Simon. Right. Again, a couple of comments that come in the chat box, Rowena and Steve, that you might be interested in having a look at. Some people like to leave early, but lots of sort of comments around sort of fascinating talk, and particularly praise around the clips. But if anyone does have any questions for Rowena and Steve, I'm sure they'd be happy to deal with them now. As I say, I can't see any chat questions as such in the chat box, but if people either want to type them in or unmute and ask. But I will kick off with the first one, if that's okay. And it links to actually a technical question. I was particularly interested in sort of the enormous bell that you held up earlier on, Rowena. And I just wondered whether some of the techniques that you described, are those techniques appropriate for all bells? Or, like, for example, the shaking, is that possible on such a big bell?
No, you wouldn't shake a big bell, but you'd need to pick it up with both hands if you were going to shake it. No, it's got to be bell appropriate. Yeah, so some of them are suitable. You could mallet any bell as long as you've got the right size mallet. You wouldn't do 4 in hand with the big bells, because you know you'd rip some tendons somewhere. Yeah,
the big bells, just putting into some sort of context, the Whitechapel ones, which tend to have a fair bit of bell metal in, they're about 5 kilos. So that's our biggest bells. This one is a 5 kilo bell. And whilst you can pick it up single-handedly, you can lift it up, and I think it does take a bit out of you. I could tell you when you are ringing that that you can keep it up for a while, and especially if you're hand to hand and everything else, or weaving as they call it. When if you saw in the Ecclesfield one where he was up and down the table playing. I think someone asked a question about the bells which are standing on their bell mouth, having made the observation, of course, that the clapper hangs down lower. The American bells, they have the flat clapper, which actually means that it doesn't protrude beyond the bell, so they can have the bell mouth down. Some of the photographs of the early, the 1800s ringers, they have a lot of bells with the bell mouth down. So the clapper probably in those was a different type from what we have in the modern handbell.
Super, thank you. And can I ask you both, what are your favourite styles of handbell tuning in? Is it four in a hand, or is it picking off the table? What do you enjoy?
Off the shoulder.
Sure.
Yeah, we as a group, and indeed the West Midlands 5-octave group, we all play off the shoulder, unless you're on the big bells. You're down on that bottom octave, you were playing that off the table, because it's just physically impossible to keep going for several hours playing off the shoulder and supporting that. I think Aidan did a course not long ago, and he was going through all the mechanics of actually leaning into the bells and how it destroys your back and your arm. You're trying to keep it there, and the heavy bells just aren't made for it.
Super. Thank you. We had a question come in from David Baverstock, who asked, and picking up on Simon's last point or last remark, how much awareness is there from the handbell ringers of Great Britain about change ringing?
A lot of the handbell ringers are or were cowbell ringers, not necessarily in the centre of life with things, but a lot of them did start off that way, and they're all aware of the structures. Whether they're aware of quite as how advanced the Central Council is these days, I'm not too sure.
At the National Rally, there's always a series of workshops, and there's nearly always a workshop where you can do change ringing on handbells. Very simple, but it introduces to those people who don't know anything about change ringing the concept that you don't have to ring tunes on handbells.
Sure. And you touched at the end of your presentation about kind of the some of the similarities and differences to change ringing. I just wondered, and what sort of some of the things that the handbell ringers of Great Britain are doing to try and promote tune ringing. I wonder what your thoughts on what the sort of the next 15, 20 years are for tune ringing in Great Britain. Are you sort of optimistic for the future, or are you worried about things? Do you think drastically things have to change if we're going to improve the perception of tune ringing, let alone cowbell ringing? That's a different issue altogether.
Well, the initiatives in schools should bear fruit, should be amazing. And also the initiatives to teach the peripatetic teachers about handbells, because as they go around schools teaching music, they can be a bit more encouraging about it, because that's more the way forward than having one teacher in school being taught who then might move on.
I think that we as I said earlier on, that it's a very visual form of music that's on its own, it doesn't work. But if you've got the performance, and I think we HRGB, we generally just need to up our performance and get a lot of concerts in, get a lot of exposure that way, get the excitement of it there. If you get to North America, then the handbells will be in the services. They won't be before the service and after the service. They're actually in with the service, and so the churches are a great development area, and then it gets part of the school curricula, the main focus of the schools. It's accepted as being one of the skills that you can actually get involved in. We've lost that a lot in the UK, haven't we? Because the music departments themselves have sort of they're struggling to actually keep their name going with it. Certainly around here, I mean, in the Solihull music department was one of the best in the country, and it pretty much doesn't exist now.
Yeah. All right, thank you for that, those reflections. I will give you a short breather to have a look through the chat box, and I just want to do two things really. First, I want to talk about next week, and then I've got a very short story of my own around tune ringing, an embarrassing story, and then I think there's a last question that's come in that we'll deal with, and then obviously we'll say goodnight. So just talk about next week. Next week is our final online session for the St Martin's Guild. When we first set these up, obviously when lockdown was first announced last March, I don't think I'd have predicted this would be going on for a year. But with the government, that with the changes, hopefully, and things beginning to ease, we will certainly be taking, in terms of a weekly online session, that will come to an end next week. Obviously, we'll keep an eye on how things are going, but hopefully, although it's been a wonderful program, we'll be back in our towers very soon. So next week is our final session. Unfortunately, if you are interested in coming along, you have to put up with me next week, and I will be talking about different sort of how we can be the best teachers for our students. But what I'm not doing in that talk is picking up sort of how to teach particular bell handling skills or anything like that. I'm actually going to look at educational research and think about what that can tell us about how we learn and how we can teach. So hopefully that sounds a little bit interesting, possibly, and I can encourage some of you to come along and join us for that, even if you have to work with me talking for a bit of time. So that's next week, again, same time, 7 o'clock, and that will finish off our online programme. I do have a short reminiscence about teaching tune ringing. Many years ago, my first teaching job, I go back 10 years now, Chris Mills, who many of you will know, came to the school that I taught at to do tune ringing, Christmas carols. And the students loved doing it. We had a couple of groups of students doing it. And, I think there's a real enthusiasm for children doing tune ringing. I think that's a real bonus actually for handbell ringing. And we played in the Christmas concert, and Chris organised it all, and it was wonderful. And the second year we did it, Chris said to me, look, it's too far. It's a long, it's an hour journey for her. I will teach you how to do it. And then you can lead the group. And so I began to realise very quickly how challenging teaching tune ringing is. It sounds very straightforward. And, the way you presented it tonight, you've made the complex very simple, but actually it's really hard to do and really hard to teach. And I remember we'd prepared for the Christmas concert, and we were there and the whole school was looking at the Christmas concert, and the head, who was kind of a petrifying woman, really, and I remember the tune ringing starting, and it went wrong halfway through. And all I remember is looking out of the corner of my eye and the head turning around, and I thought, I'm going to be hauled into her office the next morning, my P45 given to me, because she was very proud of the school, and I just destroyed, the Christmas concert. So that's my story about tune ringing. But it was a wonderful experience, and the children loved it. And we did manage to somehow salvage from the wreck of my attempting to teach tune ringing. And really, it should rest with the professionals, I think, rather than amateurs like me doing that.
Well, actually, Arthur, I wholly disagree with that. Stick with it, because you can do it. There'll be a level which will be absolutely acceptable. And I can assure you that even the most practiced and the supposedly the best in the region have absolute disasters during concerts. The key really is to get the last chord right, and look as though you're all supposed to have got there in a jumble.
Yeah.
But you get things like you turn over 2 pages of music at the same time, and you're totally lost. Or you turn a page over with a quick grab of handbells, and the music stand falls off the table, and you've lost all the music. Oh, disaster upon disaster. It is just like a peerless 7 triples.
Yeah, that makes it all the more fun in some ways when it goes well.
Yes, indeed.
Super. We do have a question. I'll just ask this question briefly, and then we'll call tonight round. But Alison's put a question in, which is: who owns the large sets of bells? How are they stored and transported? Are they owned by, like your set, for example? Are they individually owned, or are they owned by the HRGB?
Well, we've actually got two sets of bells available to the Knoll ringers, One set is a church-owned one, and the other one, which is this big set, is in fact privately owned. And around the country, probably still a majority of them are owned by churches, and used by church affiliated groups. But there are a lot that can be privately owned.
The set that is used by the West Midland Bell Ensemble, which is the 5-octave orchestra in the Midlands, was bought by HRGB from Gordon Lane when he was getting rid of the 5-octave set from Kingsbury. So rather than just get rid of them, he made it favourable for HRGB West Midlands to buy them. And they are stored in a church hall where we practice. They're locked away in a cupboard. And to transport them, there's a lot of elbow grease and big cars.
Super. Thank you, Stephen Rowe. Thank you so much for speaking to us tonight. I think it's been wonderful for you to share your passion with us. It's been great to hear and see the clips. You know, as I say, there's a real beauty, I think, in the sort of complexity of handbell ringing, but also the sort of simplicity that listen to the music goes with. So thank you for sharing your passion with us, and thank you, and Simon as well, for sharing the connection and sort of beginning. This is a step in forming those connections between tune ringers and change ringers. I think that's such an important step forward in the future. So thank you for your time on behalf of all of us here tonight, and on behalf of the St Martin's Guild. And I will stop the recording and wish everyone a good night. But thank you both.
You're more than welcome.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you.